Man, it's been a long time coming. What's going on, everybody? I'm just gonna simplify the intro. It's Killer here, and we're back with another E7 video. And it's been a long time since my last Epic 7 video, huh? It's been what, a couple months, 2 months since the end of the last RTA season, and I'm happy to announce is that I finally was able to make another ending in Emperor for RTA. So as some people know, I was able to finish an Emperor for the Ambition season, and now in the Conquest season, I was able to get another Emperor replacement. So I'm just gonna be going over my account, the units that I used, and kind of just like talking about it. So yeah, let's get into it. So I attempted to record this video, and it was 40 minutes, and I was barely halfway through my unit, so I'm gonna speed it up a little bit. I'm not really gonna go over PvE units, but I'll just go over myself real quick. Hi, I'm Killer Jin. My in-game name is Cajun, and mainly a bruiser player, Banshee gamer, you know, the usual. So PvE, not built, but I did try to build him for the RTA season. I just didn't get the gear for it. Holiday Euphine was geared. She did get drafted once or twice. Her buffs are nice, but she didn't really fit my playstyle. She's definitely a aggro style unit as a more defensive closer Charles. And I really struggled to find places where she excelled and where she wouldn't just get banned. So she was geared if I needed her, but didn't really get to use her. Hua-Young as a standard player was permabanned for me, but she is geared for like Guild War and stuff. Absolutely busted unit. I'm glad she's getting nerfed, although I feel like her nerfs were kind of how do I put this? I mean, I don't want to say she just got gutted, because I feel like she'll still be a usable character at least, but her nerfs were a lot. Jacko, I drafted once by accident, and she actually won that fight, so I'm kind of surprised. It makes me want to reconsider counter Jacko, because the counter was actually kind of nice. Kind of sucks that I don't think she can proc the S2 off a counter, but Chains of Chiron can be a really nice tempo swing for standard fights. So maybe I'll try out a Bruiser Jacko, but for right now, this is just the gear that she just had on. But I mean, she won, so can't really complain about it too much. Ravi, after her buffs, she was surprisingly good. I was one of the people who didn't think that Ravi was going to be super good, but she showed up. I'm not on the right EE to fight Alencias, but I usually don't have a super big problem with Alencias, personally, because I don't tend to draft, just like solo DPS drafts where injury can really hurt me too much. But yeah, it was nice to see Ravi back in the meta. She was plus 14, and she's been holding this gear since she was meta, like what, it feels like 2 years ago, right? So I'm glad that she finally got to see the light again. Araz, so last season I didn't have him geared for RTA, and that really did hurt my chances of going over for last season. But so I geared him up, I put some decent gear on him, and yeah, that was that. This neck really does need to go, but I really struggle with right side pieces, especially the rings and the neck. The boots I'm not as bad in, but definitely ring and neck I'd need to change. But here was the Araz build, unchanged for most of the season. Charlotte ungeared. Silius is mainly for PvE at this point, but I did draft her once or twice, and it did okay. I feel like if I want to draft this in RTA, I need to actually go for the full skill ups, which I honestly don't want to do. Again, I'm a standard player, so having Elf out geared isn't a super big priority for me. In this meta, with all of the immunity and kind of the faster standard units like a DJB showing up really hurt my kind of like desire to have Alpha geared. Because I used to have her geared as a Rimuru answer with immunity just to burn the analyze, but now that that's kind of Nah, that's kind of gone. I don't see a reason to have her geared outside of PvE use. Eventually, if I get the gear, I'd like to have her built as a cleave deck option. But that's not in the cards for me right now. Don't worry about the artifact. That's not what she's on before. Caesarea. I did draft actually as a standard player. No, I wouldn't say a decent bit. Every time I would draft her, it would be as a kind of aggro cleave pivot, unless it was against Senya. So when Senya first got buffed, I wasn't really sure who I wanted to draft against her, so I was trying out Caesarea for a little bit. The bombs were nice, but it just felt really slow, especially if you don't have an AoE initiator for her, because she'd always be too fast. So I wasn't able to detonate bombs on turn 1. But just placing bombs on turn 1 and then having her push back around and detonate a bunch of them was kind of nice. It was just kind of too slow was the thing. So yeah. Decently geared. The immunity is nice against units like Acid and stuff like that. Things that try to push her back. It just makes it so that she can't get disrupted as easily. Like, you'll be able to not get hit by Silence or not get hit by Provokes and stuff on turn 1, which can come in handy, but I don't see it too much in my standard fights, and I'm not confident enough to race people and then have her as as a bridge for racing, so that's that. Mercedes I drafted less and less throughout the season. In my previous RTA seasons I draft her a lot more, but I kind of been moving away from her. Even though she got buffed, it just feels really bad to draft her and she doesn't proc magic for friends and then she dies. So I've been moving away from Mercedes, but in times where I need fire AoE, she's definitely the one who's gonna come out. So if it's like Landy Stenny, I draft her. But other than that, it's kind of hard to pull her. So my Milim is unchanged for the most part. The only thing I changed was putting her on Ignition Gloves as a test, because she used to be on my 27 symbol. But yeah, here are the stats. I really like this Milim. The only thing I'd like to change is probably drop attack for speed boots. So I'd still be at 4k attack, but I'd be at like, what, not 200, like 180 speed, which would definitely be better. Because I find at this speed point, she gets lapped by Calrix. So that's like the worst case scenario if I get S3'd and then they can still cut an S2 me. But other than that, I really like this Milim build. She came out on the last day, and she honestly carried. Like, even though she was getting injured and stuff, I don't remember exactly by what, but she was like injured to like 7k HP, but she was still living. Then she was able to S3 extinct the final DPS, and then you just can't kill the Milim at that point, right, with 3 DPS on counter build like this. So she did her job, and that's all that really matters to me. She does a lot of damage, which is nice. Like, I've one-shot Proof of Valor Landies through Aureus before with this type of build, so I'm probably gonna keep it. The optimal build, I would say, would be closer to, like, it'd be more lifesteal build with unupgraded Dragon Knuckles. I think that's probably the way that you should go if you're gonna build a Milim on a Banshee set, but I didn't have the lifesteal gear, and I've been spreading my lifesteal gear really thin recently because I haven't had time to go back into Banshee and farm gear. So this is just kind of the gear she has. Eventually I'll switch it out, because like a lot of this gear is actually like really decent DPS gear. So eventually it's gonna go somewhere else. But for now, it's happy to sit on Milim. Politis. So it's really hard for me to justify having a cleave Politis, especially as not a cleaver, but I feel like for somebody like me, having 2 Politis would be nice. So I am actually working on a second Politis right here. So eventually it'll happen. Just probably not super recent, just because I'm not farming a lot of Banshee gear, so the only Banshee gear I'd have for a Degen Politis would be gear I already have, but I don't have just a bunch of counter gear lying around. So we'll see. This is the Politis for right now. Honestly, I enjoy having a semi-bruiser Politis. because in the drafts I still need her for, there are times where she just barely lives, which is, I think, just enough for what you need. Like making them use that extra attack can honestly swing a game. So it's good to have, but I feel like if I'm gonna have a Politis, I just dedicate one Bruiser and then one like full cleave Politis. So that's probably what I'm gonna go for. Carrot. Okay, so I actually wasn't too hyped on Carrot, like on my Carrot for the longest time, but at the end of the season, she honestly showed up a lot more for me, and she did pretty decent. I remember specifically the turning point was my Alencia, my Senya, and my FCC lost to a solo Carrot. So I think that was kind of like an eye-opening experience for me. That I should draft Carrot more. Like, she has a lot of built-in sustain with the continuous heal in her S3, or not. Yeah, the continuous heal in her S3, it's just a part of the skill tree. But and the damage reduction as well from her Flame Barrier passive. She can actually tank some stuff. So so here's my Carrot. She's mainly been unchanged since the actual Carrot meta, but she got built at the tail end of it, so I didn't really care enough to invest super good gear into her. But yeah, here's the Carrot build. I'm probably gonna look for better gear for her now that I've actually played her and kind of realized that she's not exactly, like, I always knew that she was a decent unit. Wherever she comes out, she's good, but I think I need to invest a little bit more into her. Cirilla's PvE farmer. The only reason she's built was because she was the unit that got me into the game, so she holds kind of special place in my heart. Shu is an absolute menace. I can't believe they thought that greenlighting Shu was okay outside of just dealing with Hwayoung. So hopefully after Hwayoung's nerf, they might look into units that they introduced for Hwayoung, because Shu feels absolutely horrible to fight when she pops off, and then you draft her and it feels like shit too because she just won't pop off. So it's one of those mechanics. It's literally the exact same feeling as Anti-Crit, right? It's like, it feels really good when it happens, but if it doesn't happen, it really feels like you just wasted your time in bringing that unit or bringing that buff. So yeah, here's my Shu. I did have her 6-star when she first released, and all I had to do was just re-gear her, so I just had some gear lying around, mainly taken from Yuffie because she was just on PvE duty. So this is the Shu. I would like to improve it a little bit, but again, not really farming Banshee that much, so kind of sucks. Clarissa is my Wyvern 13 one-shotter for the Adwave 1 instead of SSB. Luna's PvE. Okay, so Rem is mainly an anti-cleave unit, right? But in this meta, you really don't get a chance to do Rem anti-cleave. With a lot of cleavers nowadays have been drafting Sid or C. Pavel or like uncounterable units. You kind of need a little bit more of an active anti-cleave than Rem provides. I mean, in the fights where she came out, right, if they decided to go Rand, Caesarea, she tended to show up. Just because that's where she always shined in, just being able to bat back really hard. That's kind of why I like this build, because most of the damage is going to come from bombs. So if she can kill something before the bombs go off, she'll be fine. So yeah, here's the gear. I definitely would not recommend this build. If I could change the gear, I would. I'd probably go closer to 3.5k attack and then jack the bulk, because I do find that she dies a little bit too much. But with this damage, she actually does 2-tap cleaves instead of 3-taps them, which actually can make a difference. Sigrid's my bench 13 one-shotter. Summer Break Charlotte is actually one of my highest gear score units on my account, which is kind of surprising. It was kind of just gear that I had lying around, so I kind of just threw it on her. I mean, I did fill in some spots here and there that I was missing gear for, and then it ended up to be a really decent build. So it's really hard to talk about Summer Break Charlotte in this meta, right? Because she is a base speed DPS that requires your team to take turns. And as a player like me with my fastest standard support being 220 speed, it can be really tough to build up those stacks. But my account is definitely more DPS focused, so it's focused to output a little bit more damage than most. So I'm kind of okay with everything being a little bit slower as long as they have the bulk to live those turns. And Summer Break Charlotte is definitely a unit that came out a couple times during the season for fun, and she did her job, so I can't really be mad at her for that. It's more of just a comment on my account rather than her as a unit. Where she comes out, she's good. Just I struggle to draft her without units being super fast. So this is my PR right now, but this isn't the build that I had on her during RTA. Let me see if I can find it. It's this and this and this. Alright. So this was my Piera build during the RTA season. She didn't get drafted too much, to be honest. With DJB becoming like a super meta threat, it was definitely hard to justify drafting Piera, especially as a standard player. The only time I remember drafting Piera was if somebody drafted Closer Charles really early into the draft in 2-3, and then I'd usually just draft Piera in the following slots. But other than that, I find it really hard to draft Piera unless I'm trying to pivot into a aggro cleave type comp. But even then, I have Ran for that, right? So it's really hard to justify drafting Piera. Like she does have my fastest. I mean, she's not my fastest. She's not holding my fastest gear, but she's my fastest character on my account. So, just so people can see, I'll do it on Ran, but I'll show my fastest overall gear. But yeah, I haven't got a chance to try this Piera. Crit Piera was nice. It was fun to activate C Pavels, but I don't see a point for me to run it. Eventually, I'd like to get crit rate on this build, but we'll see. Alright, so here's Ran. Ran was something that I feel like, even though I didn't have a dedicated cleave deck for, it was nice to have. So I'm just gonna go over my fastest gear real quick. It's 21, that's 20, that's 18. Okay. So again, I'm not like some super fast player or anything. I just say I have mediocre gear, and that's about it, right? So I mean, I'd have to rearrange some things, but I mean, I could probably build a 310 Ran if I actually go through and rearrange everything, but I don't see a point to have a Ran that fast if I don't have anything else behind it. So here's the Ran. The only time I'd ever draft him usually is taking him from cleavers, and I don't feel like this build is good enough for that, because then he just dies, right? So just like Politis, I'm probably going to be working on a tank Ran. Oh god. Working on a tank Ran here. So when I need to take him from cleavers, he'd actually have some bulk and some staying power. I don't know if it'll do me too well, but it's worth a try at least. If it's wasted gear, I can always just feed it into... I can feed the imprint back into this Ran. So Lua is an absolute menace right now in the RTA meta, but she wasn't geared for the end of the season just because she got global banned, and I literally didn't have her. So there was a short period of time where she was not global banned in RTA, and everyone was upset, me included, because she is honestly just an oppressive unit to fight. It feels like there's nothing that really checks her in the meta, especially as a ranger that can hold guiding light. It's really hard to outspeed her with an AoE and do enough damage to kill her. Like, the only thing that would really come to mind would be, I guess, Closer Charles or Holiday Euphine, or I guess Ran, like those AoE units. But then you have to draft a bridge with them as well, because Ran or those units aren't gonna kill the Lua without with guiding light. So it's kind of hard to say, but I've been really enjoying immunity on her. I feel like it's actually really good value, just because if you get outsped by because I have Beatom, right? Against Conqueror Liliuses, I tend to draft both Lua and Beatom together, and having them both on immunity makes it so that she actually can't get CC'd on turn 1. by the Conquest, which I feel is really nice, but I'm struggling to see what happens if they just ban the beat-on, which most people haven't been. So definitely going to take some playtesting. But yeah, I'm really happy with the build. Only thing I want to change is get more speed. Like, my goal is 300 speed, and I know with these pieces I can hit it, but it's definitely the left side pieces are what's holding me back. And that's why I've been stuck in Wyvern for the past year, ever since they've been introducing more and more of these super fast units. SSB on injury, not changed from my last season. Usually she's on drink and on imprint release. So quick on the SSB injury, I definitely think that Lifesteal is probably the better build, but I built her on injury when it first came out in KD's 11, and I haven't switched her since, just because I haven't really checked if I had the Lifesteal gear to build a Lifesteal SSB. So I honestly really do enjoy this build. With injury, she actually has a semi-decent matchup into Violets. Like, I wouldn't say it's like super good, but actually, at least with drink and injury, she can fight them, but it still does take some RNG. So she's better into tanky comps. Both Rem and SSB usually for me come out against Bellions in standard drafts. That's why she's on injury, and it feels really good. Just because Bellion can't control when she AoEs, so having injury to kind of mitigate the damage, and it kind of helps mitigate the fact that the Bellion might also be on injury, because while she's injuring me, I'm injuring her, and my SSB usually comes out with a Last Rider Crow, so I'll be getting barriers to hopefully slow down the injury even further, so it does kind of swing the tempo of the injury battle in my favor. Arya is decent. Usually she's drafted as an aggro anchor. Very rarely do you see her in standard nowadays. And again, she's one of those units where she's good, she's almost a force ban. So she is geared for that, but I don't really draft her all that much. She came out once or twice during the RTA season, and she won those fights, or she got banned. So it's hard to say if that's good or bad. She did her job, right? And that's kind of all you can ask for. Let me go over the gear real quick. This helmet, I feel, is the big thing holding back this build. This helmet and these boots. Because if I can manage to get a little bit more F-res on this build, then she'd start resisting, like consistently resisting hand guy strips or Stenny stuns. Because I have actually gotten stunned by a Stenny once, but I definitely feel like there was a 0 effectiveness Stenny and you just got lucky. But again, that's on me, right, for not having enough F-res. Dizzy didn't actually come out this RTA season. With a lot of immunity, a lot of cleansers that provide immunity, like DJB and Hand Guy, it's really hard to draft Dizzy. And it kind of sucks because I had fun drafting Dizzy. So Ida is a cleave unit that actually showed up more for me than most aggro units. If I ever needed a faster AoE unit that can also help bridge my team, usually Ida was the one to come out. She was usually a 4-5, even in like super standard drafts, just because she provides a lot of value with the random combat readiness pushback and the skill null, and then the stun chance, and then just a nice chance at a defense break on the in-between turns, because usually after she burns S2 and S3, you've already gotten the value out of the unit, at least out of Ida, right? So she could die, and then at that point she just feeds a Ravi stacks. So that was the way I thought of Ida. She was definitely worth the pity that I spent on her for the custom Mystic banner, not Mystic banner, but the custom Covenant banner. So I'm happy that I actually went for her, because it was honestly a choice if I wanted to or not, or just go for imprints, and I'm really glad that I decided to pull Ida. Fairy Tail Tenebrer feels really bad, because I really like the Tennies, and they're just not good. Okay, it's not that they're not good. F10 specifically is really... She's a unit that requires really good gear, and that gear can just go on better units. But if people have extra speed effectiveness gear, I know they have F10 built. Again, she's one of those units where if she's really good in the draft, she'll come out and get banned. But I don't have like super fast gear just lying around. So this is the build that she's on. Eventually, I'd like to get her geared and actually usable. But again, with DJB in the meta right now and Hand Guy, it's really hard to draft her. PvE, DN. So I think DN EE came out at the end of last season as well, or it was the beginning of this season. I honestly can't really remember. And I don't know if people remember, but I used to have her on this like mid-speed counter build, which is closer to my Amelia now. But that build just didn't work. I tried her on the S1 EE. I don't even know if I still have it. Yeah, I do. I tried her on the old S1 EE, and I just kind of felt like she didn't provide enough value because she'd only get hit after everyone died. So I switched her to the speed build. In RTA, it's like 270, which is fast enough for what I need. And but she didn't really come out. I'm not really a big fan of drafting DN, but yeah, when she came out, she was good, and that's kind of all. It's all I can ask for. So eventually, like, I want to hit like speed demon status, right, where she's closer to like 270 or 280, 290. But I just don't have the gear for that. A lot of things on my account is just I didn't have the gear or I don't have the gear, so I'm making do with what I have. And I mean, hey, it worked, right? And that's all that really matters. Amelia on counter, unchanged from my last RTA Emperor video. It's fun having counter Amelia, because she can heal a decent chunk, but I feel like eventually, if I get the speed gear, I would switch her to speed as well. But I do actually have another Amelia in case I want to keep the counter build. But until then, I don't see too much value in counter. It's just kind of funny where they try to stop her from pushing and she counters and then heals herself up. So the F-Res is nice because I use her as my my higher F-Res cleanser. And then she provides a lot of value with counter as well. And then she has decent bulk, so she's not just gonna get one shot in the opening. I enjoy running this build, but it's hard to find value. I think the thing I need to do is find a better ring, because my goal is to get her to 220, 225 speed, so that she consistently outspeeds my DPS, because at this range, she actually RNGs my Rimuru sometimes, so that would probably need to change. Alencia, after her buffs, was super strong. I think Smilegate realized closer to the later half of the season that Alencia was maybe a little bit too strong. I personally don't think that she's like some calamity level unit, but apparently I might be in the minority for that. Like, I will admit that she does come out every game, which I mean is good, but she is not really first pick material. She's usually picked in every game because APOC Ravi's in every game, and she is a safer unit into APOC. So that's why I built her on injury. I remember very vividly that I faced one Japanese legend player who I can't remember the name of, and they had an injury Alencia, and it absolutely wrecked my APOC. So that kind of sold me on the injury train, and then yeah, I geared her like this, and I've honestly been really enjoying it. Alencia was a unit that I always used, even when she wasn't good or super meta, so it's good to see her back in the meta, and I'll definitely be working on getting her better gear, because this and this were just gear I had lying around, and it's kind of not super specialized. Rimuru is another high gear score unit on my account. He's close to 440 gear score or something. So I am waiting for the Tensori collab to come back, because I do want a little bit more imprints, because my goal is 3k attack. Because I have lost a couple games where he just barely doesn't do enough damage, so I'm definitely going to be looking at getting different gear. And the issue with this build is that he just kind of feels like he doesn't do enough. Like, he has bulk, but not bulky enough compared to a proof build. And then he has the speed, which is like the only really good thing about it, is that he'll probably have decent damage for his speed point. And then he doesn't have the attack to actually just like clean one-shot stuff. So I mean, the only thing he's like super good for against Pavels that I've seen is that super squishy Pavels will still die to Rimuru, and then he'll jump into them and then actually just cut the cleave entirely. So that's something that I have done, and the bulk does become like super nice. Like he's lived Acids and stuff and Sids, so I would probably just look to improve it through imprints. But other than that, I don't see where I would get the improvement from as much. So I might lose this now. Alright, I'll go cry, I guess. Yuffie came out once, and she got CC'd to hell, so not gonna talk about it. Armin is mainly an anti-cleave unit. Again, as somebody who doesn't have speed gear, I need to rely on... This sounds really scummy, right? But I have to rely on counter or tank down strategies in order to beat cleaves. And Armin was one of those units, but like Rem, it feels really bad to draft Armin and she doesn't counter. So I honestly was drafting her as mainly just a mitigator. The decreased damage suffered by single target attacks by 20% is a decent chunk of damage, actually. I've had my A Ravi live Watcher Shuri S3s because I usually bring Armin plus a Mitigation Knight in FCC. So it's a surprising amount of mitigation, and I really do enjoy drafting her in that case. Drafting her as just like an AoE unit feels really bad, so I stopped doing that. But maybe in fights against like heavy AoE, she can come out. I have to try that and get a little bit more comfortable with her in that scenario. All of these units aren't geared to this point. Charles ungeared, Falcon Chloe's PvE, Mort's ungeared. Senya. So here's an off-meta build. Senya on injury. So I can't say that I'd recommend this build for the standard player, but for somebody like me that's super low tempo, this injury build on Lifesteal EE was actually putting in some pretty decent value. This type of build gives you a better matchup into these single target, not even single target, but these heavy HP scaling bruisers, specifically in Apoc, Ravi, Alencia, Shu, and then Ed to an extent. I did have a game against one of my friends where my Senya practically solo DPS'd his team of Shu plus Alencia plus Ed. And just because of the injury, the constant injury just made it so that as the fight progresses, it just keeps countering the overall damage of their team just goes down, and then eventually the Senya can hard carry the fight from there, even in high frenzy. Just I feel like if I'm gonna run this build, I have to commit to max scaling the S1, because at this damage point, she doesn't do enough injury. So if I can properly optimize this build, I definitely will. My goal would be getting closer to 6k attack, but with no imprints, it's really hard to do so. So we'll see. I am actually double HP right side, so I don't know how the hell all these whales get 6k attack. That shit seems like impossible, but it'll happen eventually, right? As I'm farming KDs, farming pen sets and stuff, I'll get the gear along the way. Biking is for one-shots. Celine did come out a little bit, actually. Mainly as an anti-cleave option. Sometimes into standard. Mainly against DJBs, actually. She started coming out more and more. This tanky build is really nice against those DJB comps because she doesn't just get one-shot by the follow-up DPS. So... And she also has enough damage as is to actually kill those DPS units that are usually behind. Especially on the highest attack EE. She will one-shot Stenny still. She one-shots cleave units in cleave scenarios, so she does her job. And then with lifesteal, she actually does heal a pretty big chunk on her S3. So I'm really enjoying this build. At some point, I'd like to shift a little bit more damage while keeping the speed, or maybe even getting a little bit more speed. So... But again, the same issue applies, right? Where I'm just not farming Banshee anymore, so getting different lifesteal gear is kind of rough. Azeri has PvE. Landy on lifesteal feels really bad, right? Everyone in this meta, I feel like, has a Milim at least geared. And this Milim doesn't, or this Landy doesn't live a Milim. and she's too slow. Like, without speed buff, she can sometimes get lapped, and it gets really scary, but in the turns where she, or in the games where they have, like, a little reach and they don't ban the Landy, the lifesteal build really does help, because usually the units can hit her a little bit out of stealth. Like, Araz was a big one that you don't really think about, but if he S3s, he will knock Landy out of stealth. So having the little bit of lifesteal to heal back after you live that turn is pretty massive. So that's why I was kind of enjoying the lifesteal build. Charlotte's not super prevalent in the meta right now, so it's okay. And then, yeah, a little bit higher damage and then decent bulk. I'm just lower speed, but that's kind of like the story of my account overall. Rowana is on trash gear. I gave her gear to Sharoon for the most part, and she's just been holding gear from now. Vivian's for PvE. Sharoon, so I remember a lot of people talking about Sharoon when she first came out and talking about how she was a really bad unit, and honestly, I feel like it's kind of come into a place in the meta where she's a pocket pick 5th pick. So she's not exactly like a unit you'll see every game or anything, but in the games where she comes out, she can actually provide a lot of value. This passive, the extra turn, extra buff, the random buff, and the barrier and stuff do come up every now and again. That barrier is really good, especially if it's on a... Or it's not even just like the barrier, but it's like having the barrier, especially for something like Landy, is really nice, prevents her from getting knocked out of stealth. And then the extra buff can like really swing the tempo of a fight. So because like think about it, right? Increased attack on your highest attack character, it's just free value. Increased crit hit chance can be kind of shitty, because you usually build most of your DPS with 100% crit, so that's probably one of the lower value ones. Crit damage is just free, right? Especially as a standard player, you're not really going for 300 to 350 crit damage, or if you are, you're usually like close to 300, so you'll still get a decent amount of value from the crit damage buff. And then continuous heal is just nice because it's just free health, right? And yeah, I did draft Sharoon a little bit, and she did honestly do her job. Outside of getting 15%, which you can't really like fault the character for, because 15% hurts everyone really hard. So I really enjoy this build. Eventually I want to get a little bit more effectiveness, and then maybe a little... Actually, I kind of like the F-res where it is. She's not really a unit that gets debuffed super often. So just get a more effectiveness, and then I'll be happy while keeping this bulk. Conquer Lilius is the main reason that I actually don't have time to farm Banshee. My goal for my Conquer Lilius is to kind of keep these stats, but make 300 speed, which I'm getting really close to. The only thing I need to change is my chest piece and my ring, and then I'll be close to it. So I'll go over the gear real quick. Definitely not like super relatable. It's all like 20 speed except for the chest and the ring, but this bulk on immunity is really nice. So I've had times where she actually just straight up lives cleaves, because they think that she's like a scrub Lilius, but no, this Lilius, especially with mitigation, can actually output some decent, or she can actually tank some pretty decent hits, and then she provides the vigor and stuff. So I'm really happy with this build. This bulk is really nice. It saved me a couple times where especially against the Aravis, where they try to S3 my Conquer Lilius and she just eats it. So I really enjoy Conquer Lilius. I think she is still a problem unit, don't get me wrong, but having a bulky Lilius like this for a player like me is super important. Jkise is definitely a pocket pick unit for like exclusively 4-5, and where she comes out, she's decent. She usually comes out against hand guy plus LQC comps, which didn't show up too much until closer to the end of the season. And sometimes against Stenny, it's really risky to draft this Jkise into Stenny, because if it doesn't just kill her, you're giving her her multi-attack S1. So, I mean, usually she does, or it's really close. So I really enjoyed like a DPS Jkise build. She does have a splash of effectiveness too, so the people who put just like a handful of effective resistance on hand guys still get caught by this. And that does help me, that actually does help us swing fights a little bit, because then I'm able to CC the LQC, and then we can go from there. So, okay, speaking of LQC, here's my LQC build. I think she's also unchanged from my last RTA video. I haven't got a chance to farm or get better pen gear, so that's kind of what's holding back the build a decent bit. Other than that, I do enjoy this build. I think I should drop crit rate for a little bit more crit damage or bulk in HP, but I don't really, again, that's not going to come from my pen sets, I feel. So I feel like it's going to be kind of hard to replace it, but we'll see. Because, I mean, it's nice to have crit rate, because 85 crit rate is still a decent crit rate against, like, without Hellcutter stacks. Like, even with just, like, 1 or 2 Hellcutter stacks, with 1 stack, she's at 85% crit, which is an amount that people deem like the bare minimum for a DPS. So I don't know how many games I've won or lost because I have such high crit rate, but it's definitely nice to have, because then you can just draft her as a normal DPS, right? Usually you wouldn't, but there are times where you can draft her into an APOC Gravity and then you have to ban the APOC, or you can draft her into solo DPS hand guys or ADSs and she'll do okay. That's just the big thing with LQC, right? She's really weak to CC. She's really weak into super tanky units, because if her S3 doesn't kill, she kind of sits there for a turn. Until she can get her immunity back up and protect herself for the rest of that turn, it's kind of scary. Because a lot of the dark units in this meta are rather super high damage, or they're super high control, or they're just like Cowrick. So, because like Cowrick, attack break will neuter her. A seal makes it so that she doesn't push, and then she becomes really squishy. And APOC, APOCs really, right now are built on proof, so this might not kill. It's really hard to draft LQC, especially with everyone swinging aggro cleave. Like having the option to swing into an LQC puts you on the back foot really bad, because very rarely will LQC actually live in aggro team. Bellion is unchanged, I think, as well. Same gear. I prefer injury build, but this injury build is honestly scuffed as crap, so she does her job where I draft her. Usually in the fights where she's good, she gets banned or even pre-banned. A lot of people have been pre-banning Bellion as aggro or cleavers, and even standard players as well, because they just want to have the option to draft Stenny. I personally don't draft Bellion. I don't think she's that bad or like that problematic of a unit, but I feel like I'm in the minority there. So she's geared if I need her, but rarely to come out. Crimson Armin is a like backup Aureus holder, because if they like ban FCC, I will still need a decent Aureus holder. So she's usually the one that comes out. She's nice, like it's fun to draft Armin, and then usually if your team just lives a cleave, putting up the invincibility for turn 1 will just straight up, will just yield, right? So it's nice, and she is one of the knights that provides double mitigation in Aureus and her passive. So I feel like as a standard player, if you're not going to draft, or if you're not going to have multiple Aureus knights, or if you're not going to build Trozit, having Crimson Army would be nice, because I don't actually have Trozit built, so I usually need to draft a more AoE-centric knight for anti-cleave, so usually Carmen is the one that comes out if SCC is banned. Last Rider Crow on Lifesteal is another off-meta build, definitely. It works better into Bellions and stuff. Again, I usually draft him into Bellion with SSB, so he's usually the person who's taking most of the damage from SSB, so having him on Lifesteal can kind of help mitigate the extra damage he's taking. And then eventually just, if it comes down to it, him being able to horse, his first horse heals for like 3.5, I think, which isn't exactly a lot, but it's nice, it's a good amount of damage. And eventually as it ramps up, it goes to 4k and 5k. And especially if you can start soul burning this, he becomes a really annoying unit to deal with. Because in those types of teams, I always leave Bellion until the end. Because she's feeding Last Rider Crow and she's getting injured by SSB and stuff like that. So I really enjoy him, drafting him. But this is definitely not a super meta build. Spirit Eye Celine, again, is one of those units where you don't really see her come out, but when she does, she's like almost a force ban. So she is geared. I don't think I actually got a chance to draft her during this RTA season. I fought her a couple times, but I didn't really get to play her. She's not super useful for my playstyle, right? So she's geared, but mainly a Guild War unit at this point. Let me show the gear. I don't know if I did or not, but I want to get her a little bit faster because, like, as you can see, like, some of her gear is like decently speeded, but like this piece is kind of missing some speed, and this piece is definitely missing some speed. I'll show you what I'm at right now. I have this helmet, so I think all I'm doing is waiting for another imprint of her to get her to 100% crit, and then switching the effectiveness to crit damage. And then I feel like I'll be a little bit more happy with this build. But until then, I'm just kind of waiting on an imprint. I will be pulling on Celine Banner, actually, to see if I can just snipe an imprint. Commander Pavel, again, not a unit that I use very often as a standard player. So, he's kind of low attack, which kind of sucks. I think this sword is actually not helping me at all. Like, it's 22 speed, right? And you're like, wow, it's on a unit that you build with no speed, but I just don't have destruction gear. I never kept any of it because it was trash for the longest time. So, yeah, there's the gear. It's fun drafting C Pavel, but I don't have the units nor the gear for it, so he's mainly just a RTA or arena unit. Faith of Lidica, I love to death. She's like one of my favorite units in the game, but I just don't have the gear to do her justice. It really does suck. Eventually, as I'm farming as I'm farming Wyvern, I'll hopefully get the gear to build a decent DPS. Honestly, I don't even care if she's a DPS. I just want her to be a bruiser, right? As a personal thing, I really do enjoy drafting units as bruisers. I'm not the biggest fan of like super tank units that do no damage or glass cannon type builds. So I always like my units to have a little bit of bulk. And I feel like she does have a decent amount of bulk right now, but this gear is going to change eventually, so. Also, don't worry about why she's SSS. I've pulled a lot of Lidicas. Watcher Shuri is on Rage set right now. It's not some, like, fast PvE unit. It's literally just because I didn't have the speed set gear, and I had a bunch of decently fast Rage gear, so I put him on Rage set. And, it's kind of nice to have him on Rage, right? Because a lot of the super fast openers provide debuffs. So he does actually do decent damage, and I feel like it makes up for the lack of damage that I have. But I just have to have the condition of a debuff. So he didn't show up too much for me, but he's geared if I need him, and that's good. AOL is also unchanged from my last RTA video, so not going to comment on it too much. If you want to see or hear my my in-depth analysis or thought process behind why these units are on their gear, you can probably check out the last RTA video. If people ask for it, I can put it in the comments, or I'll put it in the description of the video. But yeah, counter AOL is fun. I think I need a second AOL because this build is fun, but having a build like this, she doesn't do enough because she's not tanky enough to like live a long time in these standard fights, but she's also not fast enough to cut cleaves. So I would definitely, if I get a second AOL, I would build two. I think a lot of people, at least the whales that I think have two AOLs, one for standard and then one for cleave, or at least aggro, so I'm definitely going to be adapting that. I feel like the next step for my account is having units that are multi-purpose, or like 2 units built in 2 different ways to supplement my my holes in my drafting and my units and stuff. Sage Bao was previously on a speed build, and I moved him to this counter semi-high FRES build. And he does okay. So I think I should go with Proof of Valor or Bastion of Hope, I think it is, right? Honestly don't remember the name. Can I even find it? Bastion of Hope, yeah. So, because I don't think there's enough F-res to consistently resist units like Elfeld that he's usually fighting as an anti-cleave unit. So, it's rather I want to go for 200 F-res and then go for a survival artifact like Proof of Valor or keep him on Abyssal Crown. Like, optimally, I keep him on Abyssal Crown because Abyssal Crown is good as an extra check just in case I get 15%ed or whatever. But other than that, yeah, Sage Battle actually showed up a lot this season because a lot of the units in the meta because of CPAV will take multiple turns. So he actually just gets the extra value in the push. Silver Blade is honestly kind of bad. Also, but she's just not for me. She's not, she's more of an aggro-focused CCR, and I don't play aggro, so she's useless for me. Solitaria showed up a little bit during the RT season, mainly for her passive. I'm not really a super heavy debuff drafter, but she did show up a little bit. And especially with Ed coming out, I feel it's kind of hard to draft Solitaria, because she's like almost exclusively now a 4-5 rather than like a 3 pick, and then you follow up with another support and another DPS, because Ed actually just like wrecks Solly. So I probably have to rearrange my draft order with her because I'm still kind of used to her drafting her in a 3, but she does fine where I need her. So Sylvan Sage Vivian has been geared like this for a long while, but I haven't actually drafted her too much. I'm not super well versed in when I should be drafting her, but she seems like another niche 4-5 pick, and that's kind of cool because I feel like as a standard player, the 4-5 is the most important part of your draft. So as a standard player, having the 4-5 is definitely important. She did come out once though, and she did win that fight, so that was cool. Actually, no, she lost that fight because her S1 wasn't full mullet, so I rage full mullet her S1 and then didn't draft her after that. So chatty buff is going to be nice for her because the only thing that's going to really hurt her into is DJB, but you're probably not drafting her in DJB anyways, so it doesn't matter too much. And yeah, so she's geared. Eventually, I'll learn how to draft her a little bit more. But until then, this is your gear. Maid Chloe has like a backup set of effect res gear. She's kind of low on the F res, but her passive gives her plus 20, so she's effectively 180. The counter build's really nice. Just I struggle to actually draft Maid. But I think having her geared will be nice because there are times where I think about drafting her. So having her geared is important. Bdom. So I know I stated as a I don't really play aggro, and Bdom actually is a decent anti-cleave option. That's usually where I draft her, and I have a lot of fun drafting her as an anti-cleave option. Mainly into Alphelt was a big one that she came out a lot in, and then sometimes into Sids as well if I'm drafting another squishy unit somewhere in my draft, like a Politis. Like if I can take the Politis from the Cleaver and then draft Moon Bunny, it usually does okay because then it can protect my my A-Ravi or a different unit from getting one shot with the S1 afterwards. And she does have enough bulk on imprint concentration to hopefully live the Acid S3. Obviously without attack buff, with attack buff he becomes like really scary, but you try to not give them both. Ruel is geared, unchanged from my last video, but I just didn't draft her. I'm not a super big fan of drafting Ruel. I feel like she's like really slow and this meta is just kind of a little bit too fast for her. But if I'm gonna draft risky units like Rylet, probably I should learn to draft Ruel with him, just in case he does get like randomly hit. It would be nice to have like that extra bit of insurance, but I usually don't feel the need to go down that route. APOC, Ravi, definitely an MVP of like every season, and I really enjoy the skin actually. Somebody pointed out to me something about her skin that I'm not gonna say because it's cursed, and I'm not gonna put you guys through that. But so here's the gear. I really enjoy this Aravi build. Like, it's kind of slow, which kind of blows, but other than that, I think the bulk's there, and the damage is decent. And I'm on Anchor, so it does actually have decent solo potential. Every season, there are a couple games that I definitely win just because she's on Anchor plus counter, and she's able to just sustain long enough to rather get the S3 off or kill the problem DPS, and then she's just fine from there. So I don't think I'm ever gonna switch off this counter build with Anchor, but if I get better gear, like if I get a better ring and then higher gear score boots or reshift some gear, maybe I'll be able to switch to Seed instead. But the limitation for Seed being once per turn, although needed, kind of pushes me away from it, because you can still get like super CC'd, because a lot of units in this meta provide 2 debuffs, and while Seed can proc on the turn that you get debuffed, I don't know if it's worth it, considering you get hit by 2 debuffs and then hit by another 2 debuffs, and then you only have 3 left, except the second set of debuffs are like stun and provoke and seal and stuff. So I like Anchor. I'll probably die on this hill. I'm definitely not a proof advocate, although proof can be annoying, but like I could easily just switch to proof and have a decent Aravi, right? But I prefer Anchor, so I'm gonna keep running Anchor. Dilibet is practically exclusively anti-cleave, or at least anti-control, and the pen set people say is really low value, but I honestly really do enjoy pen set because it helps me in the matchups, especially into control, right? Where if it's like the most common control teams you'll see is APOC plus AOL plus Pyrrha for some reason, and the pen set really does help with those fights. So pen set's really nice, especially into AOLs. Like I've hit a standard build AOLs, like the super tanky ones, for like 7k on an S1, and it honestly does add up, especially into like I've brought Dilibet plus Alencia into APOC Ravis before, and it's actually done decent. It's mainly because of the injury, but even without Death Break, she'll still hit the Aravi pretty hard. So that's kind of it, right? Like, she does her job as the build with speed, so I don't see why I switch her to counter, because counter makes it like really hard to control when she gets the cut. So I don't really want to go for that, but it's also better into like a more standard fights, so it's hard to say. If I could keep the speed and go counter, I probably would, but I don't know if I have that gear. Okay, another off-meta build is my hand guy, so he's on counter pen. I think his S1 is an absurd amount of value, and it feels like almost a throw to not go for counter. Like, I'm not like against people who build him on speed. I definitely think that speed is the better build, and it's easier to build. But if you can get the stats for him on counter, because I've seen a couple 250 speed counter hand guys before, and I feel like that's probably the best build, but you need a lot of speed on every piece of gear to make it there. I think it's close to 20 speed average on counter set to get that type of stats. So definitely not gear that everyone has, and I think that's the reason why you don't see it very often. So I've kind of settled for a slower build instead. But I like the damage on him, it's nice. Eventually I'd like to switch this neck out and get a little bit more HP, and then I'll be like super happy with him. If I can get him to like 22k HP, that'll be like best case scenario. And I do have him on the possibility of instant concentration, and my goal is to get him to 100 F-res with concentration, just to help resist those some of those units that can land debuffs on turn 1. So I mean, that's kind of it, right? Like, counter is nice, he does decent damage, so Warhorn still kind of cuts the important things. FCC unchanged from my last showcase, I think. Or maybe she has changed a little bit. I know I switched her helmet and stuff and her neck. So yeah, she's on a Bruiser build. Let's go over the gear. Bruiser FCC is definitely not a super meta build. Like, a lot of people, if they're gonna go with a semi-decent FCC, they go 30k HP with crit rate and no crit damage. And I know it's all for the barrier, right? Because everyone values her barriers like a lot. Like, that's the whole reason you draft FCC, right? But this HP point compared to a 30k HP FCC, it's only a difference of 1000 HP, and this difference, like the difference in damage, definitely makes up for the little 1000 HP that you're getting from the barrier. So I have so much fun with Bruiser FCC. I have one-shot cleave teams with her, and it's honestly like the best feeling. Alright, here's Shadow Knight Pillis. She mainly got geared to deal with Conquer Lilius, but I just started pre-banning her anyways. I feel like once I start, like, now in this meta with Lua being in and Hwayoung hopefully not being as overpowered, I might have to stop banning Conquer Lilius and just fight her. And then I feel like I'll actually have an okay matchup into her, especially with Pillis and a lot of my other units. Because I feel like it'd be really tough to actually fit Conquer Lilius into a lot of these cleaves in this meta. Like, sure, she provides the extra 30% attack through Vigor, but a lot of the units in the cleave team are there for a reason. So I don't think the 30% attack and defense would outweigh the value of a whole extra DPS in those drafts. So the only thing it'd kind of suck into would be standard. And especially as somebody who doesn't have Lionheart Sermia, as you might have noticed through my my lights, I'm kind of worried about fighting Conquer Lilius because I don't have anything to super punish the dual attacks. So, I mean, we'll see this coming season. RB is mainly anti-cleave, scratch that, practically exclusively anti-cleave. He has my plus 18 Shepherd, which he previously didn't. He had my plus 15 one before, if I can find it. Yeah, he had a plus 15 one before. So I like this type of RB because it still does enough damage to at least one-shot some cleave teams, or at least do a lot of damage to them, where my my support DPS can follow up, or they'll just kill if they got countered once. So, and he also has enough bulk to live things like Sid and some of the cleave units. So, like, he has enough damage to live in S2 from Ida, so that the S3 won't kill him, and that puts them in a tough spot. Or the Sid with attack buff with Aureus sometimes might not kill him, or it can just miss, and it's a lot of RNG for the cleaver to deal with, which is again something that you kind of need as a super tank down slow anti-cleave. So yeah, eventually I want to change this ring and then get him to, I want to see the 13k HP and then kind of get the damage up a little bit, because sometimes the cleave team just lose. Acid, I don't have a lot of speed gear left over. Like as I stated, right, a lot of my farming is in Banshee, right? So I don't have a lot of speed gear for units like B-Dom that were immediately after a bunch of other speed units, and then we have Lua, and then we have units like Piera or Ran that need to be fast, but then you have units like Conquer Lilius that need to be fast. It's a lot of speed gear to be passing around, and Acid, I feel, isn't a unit that you can kind of be like, whatever's fast, just throw on him, because he actually still does need to do damage. So, he does have some decently fast gear. Like, I think all of his left side is 18 speed, but then his right side's like really shit, right? So it's 11 and 12. And then, so my goal is, as I'm farming, to get 295 to 300 acid, which is possible. If I get 18 speed here and here, I'll hit, like, I think 293 was the amount that I calculated, which honestly is a good enough speed point for me. Because I'm not in the like the super high ranks where everyone's Rands are 310 or everyone's Sids are 300 and stuff. So getting him to at least 295 will help me cleanly contest Sids. Maybe not contest the follow-up with the speed imprint, but I'll be able to speed RNG them with the imprints. So it does suck to have to rely on speed RNG, but at the high levels, it honestly all comes down to speed RNG. So I could, like, for all I know, I could get a 300 Sid or Acid and then outspeed a 310 Rand. Like, that stuff just happens at speed points at 300 plus. So that's kind of what I'm aiming for, and hopefully I can get it. Remnant Violet is kind of an interesting unit. A lot of things have kind of just been happening to give him stonks. Like, he got buffed. He's getting buffed this coming patch, and they buffed Double-Edged Crescent, which was stupid. I can't believe they gave this motherfucker another good artifact to use, because it feels like all of the evasion artifacts are just like, yep, throw it on Violet and he carries. But I really do enjoy Rylet, actually. His S3 does a dumb amount of damage with the 50% def pen plus pen set, and he provides a decent amount of survival for himself with the evasion buff, and especially with the countering, he can lifesteal and then he can jump into something. And now with his buffs, even Double-Edged Crescent is going to be even better on him, because when he counters, if that's what procs him, or if that's what gets him to 5 focus, he'll jump anyways. So I really like drafting Rylet. Like, obviously not into some like into the drafts where he sucks, but into Bellion he comes out usually in the 4-5. So that's usually where he shows up. Other than that, I'm not a big fan of drafting him. The only other time I see him is against Lionheart Sermia, just so that I can hopefully blow her up before one of my units counter, because I would struggle a lot against Lionheart Sermia because a lot of my units are on counter. So I need units like Rylet to blow her up in the opener, or at least do enough damage so I can kill her before she starts getting value in her S3s. Operator Cigarette, not a unit that I draft as a standard player very much, but she is geared. My goal for my OpSig is to get her to 270 speed, so that she'd be faster than all of my other, like, mid-speed aggro DPS. So it's a struggle. The biggest thing that I need to replace is the sword, and then everything else is decently speeded. I mean, maybe the chest could go, but it'd be really hard to find value in the chest. So yeah, that's my OpSig. She does good enough damage. Like, I know most people run, I think, 245 with 300 crit damage, and I'm barely below that, except I have almost 10 speed on them, so it's still within the realm of like a normal OpSig. It's probably a little bit faster. Archdemon Shadow, I drafted a lot. As a standard player, we've shifted into like a standard control meta where all of the DPS that you see a lot in standard like have debuffs, or they're reliant on debuffs, or they're there to counter debuffs. So ADS is definitely a fun unit to have as a standard player, and I'm definitely going to be I'm honestly really happy with this build, because the 100 effectiveness means that I can seal Rowanas and AOLs without soul burn, which comes in handy, because sometimes you just don't have the opportunity to get that soul burn S1 before something happens. So I really enjoy this type of build. Maybe I can get the bulk up a little bit, but I feel like she has enough bulk. Maybe she's a little bit heavy in the defense and a little bit light on the HP, so maybe I could use a little bit more rearranging, but other than that, I'm really happy with this build. CDOM ungeared. S10 also unchanged from my last RTA account showcase, I think. Lifesteal build is still accumulating value, but I honestly drafted Stenny less this season. I find it's really hard to draft Stenny as a standard player with things like Senia running around, or the big one was the prevalence of Shualencia. Because I've played a lot of games where Shu Alencia, like my Shu and my Alencia S3 just killed the Steady. So having this much bulk is nice. She usually lives stuff like that, but she then has the issue of doing enough damage to heal herself up before the rest of her, or doing enough damage to kind of keep you in that fight. So maybe as the beta kind of slows down a little bit, I'll start drafting Steady a little bit more. But I was just really scared to draft Steady into a lot of these people who have the possibility of swinging their drafts into cleave. Destina was a unit that I actually did draft a decent bit. I don't know what it is, but closer to the end of the season, a lot of people started drafting Destina into AOL. Like, they would go hand guy plus hand guy into AOLs and then just fight it. So this is the Destina, honestly unchanged from when I was farming slow Banshee with her, except I gave her Returnus. So at this speed, she can hopefully cut the rest of my units. Because a 11% CR bush is nothing to scoff on. I think it goes up to, I think 12.8 or something. Like, it's a really weird number. Like, I don't think it's 15%, but it's a decent push for somebody as slow as me if they try to debuff me. So again, you got to do what you got to do with no DJB, right? So that's the build. BBK, I never actually got a chance to gear for anti-cleave, but she would be on resist build. So that's that. Astromancer Laner didn't come out in time. And then the only other unit that I guess I can show is Flan. She used to have some of my Piera gear that Piera has right now, so I'll just go over it real quick. Again, I'm not a cleaver by any means, so this is what she had on before, but I'm not a cleaver, right? So I have no reason to have Flan geared as much, but I feel like she's one of those units that you can slam on 4-5, and then it just makes your team an aggro team just immediately. So yeah, that's kind of the end of my account. This video is an hour and 10 minutes long, and yeah, I'm really glad that I was able to finish Emperor. I was really getting discouraged that I felt like I had the gear and I had the brain to make it to Emperor, but I was always just barely out of cutoff. Like, the past 3 seasons, I was always ranked 1500, which is literally like 2 or 3 wins away from Emperor, and that's always where I just got stuck. So I'm happy to know that
what do I sell?
I'm not like completely like a washed Emperor player type of thing. I still have the brain, I still have the gear. It's just playing the games and then not getting discouraged throughout the climb. So yeah, that's gonna be the end of the video finally. If anyone wants to know the specific gear score for any of my units, feel free to comment it in the description. I will gladly give it to you. The reason I didn't have it here is because I actually don't have fribbles. I gear all of my characters manually, and I have to calculate all of the gear score manually as well. So that's why I don't have like a screenshot of my fribbles for it, because I don't have fribbles. But if anyone wants to know the gear score for these units, feel free to comment in the description. I will gladly calculate it for you and give it to you. But yeah, that's going to be it. From now on, I'm definitely going to be taking a more casual RTA angle towards art, or casual perspective towards RTA, unless it's a frame that I really enjoy. Because the frames are like the only reason you'd actually climb for RTA, right? Because you get the skin at Masters. So you don't need to sit there and grind out to champion or what is it, champion or emperor even, unless you really enjoy the frame. So that's like the main reason I do it, because if I really enjoy the frame, that's where I climb. So yeah, that's it. If anyone has any more questions for me, make sure to leave it in the comments. Yeah, make sure to leave it in the comments. I always respond to my comments just because I keep notifications for it. I'm not a super big YouTuber or anything, but I do read them. Even if I don't respond or I don't feel like it's a question that I need to respond to, I will read it. So if there's anything to say, feel free to say it. And I know these videos attract a lot of clicks towards my channel, so if you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the video. If there's any type of content that you want to see from me for RT or for Epic 7, feel free to let me know. I'm not against posting
more E7. I definitely will be, because I'll just be taking it more casually, so I can probably play RTA throughout the season, just kind of like have fun, right? If like I want to draft a fun unit, I'll draft a fun unit, right? Like the one thing about this last season was that I tried to hold Emperor the whole season, and it really did burn me out having to play 1,000 games in a season, because that's what I did, right? I played 1,000 games this season, and it's a lot. Like, I have a lot of respect for the people who actually climb for Legend, not only for their gear, but just for their ability to play that many games. Like, I think it's insane, but that's why they're up there and I'm down here, right? So, yeah, definitely not a super whale account, but yeah, definitely I'd say relatable gear for the most part. But yeah, that's going to be it. If you want to follow my socials or everything, they'll be in the description as well. If you want to DM me on Discord, that's down there as well. And yeah, that'll be it. Have a good day night, wherever you all are, and as always, peace out.